Alright, hi guys, my name is Nate Bartholomew, and I'm going to be walking through Advanced Scenario 7 with Austin Drake. Before we get started, make sure you have Form 6744 open on your computer, as well as Publication 4012. You're going to need both of those as we're going along to answer the scenario questions and fill out the tax return. Also, have the IRS Practice Lab open. Now, to save us some time, if you haven't already, go ahead and pause the video and read through the interview notes. I'm going to assume that you've read through them before we get started, and we're just going to dive right in. So, you're going to start in the IRS Practice Lab. We're going to go to the practice area. And we're going to start a new return. And let's go ahead and enter the Social Security number. So, here we have his Social Security card. 22700XXXX. You can replace any numbers you want right there. All right, I'm going to start this return. So let's go through and review. Austin, let's look at his intake form. Austin, it looks like he's not married, so we're going to go ahead and put single. And let's start filling out his name. I like to use cap lock, just personal preference. You don't have to do that. Now let's go ahead and find his birthday. It'll be right here on the intake form. Date of birth, 11/22/1981. All right, now let's go ahead and find his occupation. Customer service, job title right there. All right, the information for this next section we can find on the intake form. So let's go ahead and look at that. It says here he is not a dependent. You look last year, is he disabled? No, he was not a full-time student and he was not blind. So you gotta look through here. Not a dependent. He's not a full-time student. He's not blind. And none of these other ones were checked either. So now let's go ahead and enter the address. 1551 Concord Circle. And then if you just go ahead and put in the zip code, the software will automatically autofill the rest. Now let's go ahead and look for his phone number. Just as enter your own. Okay, let's go ahead and continue. Does he have dependents or qualifying persons to claim? If he did have dependents, they'd be listed right down here. He does not. So we're going to head and hit no. All right, so now let's go ahead and look at the money you earned. I like to enter myself, so let's go ahead and enter myself. And let's look at the forms he has. So it says here on the intake form, he has wages from a form W-2. So let's go ahead and go find that W-2. That's usually where I start. Here's his W-2. So let's go ahead and enter that in. So you're going to look for the W-2 here and then hit begin. This is a standard W-2. So one thing to look for is make sure his address and name match. That will autofill right here. Just make sure that it's the same. And then it's going to ask for their employee identification number, employer number. So that's going to be found right here on the W-2, 37500. And oftentimes the system will autofill the employer name and address if that employer identification is linked to an employer in the system. So if we're lucky, that'll just autofill right there, and it looks like it did. So now we're going to go down here, and we have the boxes here. We're just going to fill in exactly what the boxes say. So 19,000, And when you put that in, it will autofill these, but we want to check to make sure it's the same. In this case, it's not, so we're going to have to change these numbers to 20,200. And then just check to make sure these numbers match. They do. Now let's go ahead and put that in. All right, now let's look for the other boxes on here. Looks like we have 12A and 12B filled out. So let's go down to 12. We had a code D, and that amount was for 1,200. And there was another one, code DD, and that was 4,400. All right, what else do we have on here? All right, retirement plan in box 13 was checked. Let's go ahead and check that. Let's come down here to the bottom. Now it's going to ask for the state. All right, so it just says put your state, so I'm going to put Utah. And then often this will automatically autofill. Now let's go ahead and look at the state income tax paid. Now it's 1,200. All right, let's look over anything else that we missed on the W-2. I don't think so, so we're going to go ahead and hit continue. We'll just enter this W-2. Perfect. Now we're going to look through other forms of income he had. Let's go back to the intake form. So looking down here, it looks like he has self-employment income from Form 1099 MISC. That's the 1099 miscellaneous. Let's go ahead and find that form. Here it is right here. The 1099 miscellaneous. And so we're going to look down this sheet on the income to see if we can find it. Here it is, Form 1099 miscellaneous. So let's go ahead and begin. So now the payer's federal ID number. Let's go ahead and look. The payer's federal ID number, 38700. 38700, and then to add whatever numbers you want. Oh, perfect. Once again, it autofilled. Bay Fitness, perfect. So we have that information autofilled. If it didn't autofill, make sure you enter that information in. Now let's scroll down. We have Austin's information already in here. That's also perfect. Now, let's see what we found here. The only thing we have here is in box 7, non-employee compensation, 9850. So let's go ahead and find box 7. Here it is, 9850. And because there's nothing else on here, that's the only thing we're going to enter. And we're going to come down and hit continue. Now it's asking, where would you like to add this income? If you remember from the beginning of our information on the notes, it says he also has a business as a personal trainer and fitness instructor called Austin's Abs. So the Schedule C, the 1099 miscellaneous is going to be attached to his self-employed business. So we're going to create a new Schedule C income from business. The business belongs to Austin, and so it's called Austin's Abs. It says leave blank if his identification number is his social security number. Because it's just him, that's likely the case. We're going to leave that blank. This is probably also his address, so we're just going to go ahead and put his home address here. Now, the interview form told us he's a cash basis taxpayer who materially participates, and he uses this business code. So the business code is going to go here, 812190. Now, if we didn't know his business code, you can actually click here, and it gives you a list where you can kind of search through different types of business activities to find the one that would be right. But for him, we were given that. So let's go ahead and hit continue. Now, so we've entered that basic information. So now we're going to have some questions about the operation of the business. Make sure you click this. The interview notes told us he's cash basis. So we go ahead and mark that. Check here if you materially participated. We know he did that, so that's checked. And he did not make any payments that would require him to file Form 1099. So we're going to go ahead and leave that one unchecked. Perfect. Now, if you remember, he received the 1099 miscellaneous And he also received an additional $4,290 in cash income and payments from individual clients. That was not included there. So let's go into the income because we're going to need to add that in. So the total income, you can see that was auto-populated. We don't need to include that, but we do need to include the cash here in his gross receipts or sales. So 4290. So let's go ahead and enter that here. And then hit continue. Perfect. Now it's going to ask us about some things like the mileage and some expenses. So let's go ahead and do the mileage first. You look down here, this gives you all the different things that show up on the Schedule C about his self-employed business. Car and truck expenses, that's probably where the mileage is going to be. So let's go ahead and hit that. So it's going to ask us here for some things. The description of the vehicle. In our interview notes, it doesn't really give us something, so we're just going to call this Austin's car. But it did tell us the car was placed in service on January 6, 2011. Let's go ahead and say January 6th, 2011. Of the total number of miles you drove during your vehicle during the tax year, enter the number of miles you used your vehicle for each of the following: business, commuting, other. So in order to know how much each of these values should be, we're going to go ahead and look in publication 4012 because this will probably give us some clues as to what we should do. So when you're using 4012, it's most helpful to just go here to the table of contents and kind of scroll through and see if you can see something that might relate. I'm looking over here and you can see Schedule C, car and truck expenses. So that's where we're at right now, so that's probably going to give us the best clue. So I'm going to go ahead and click this and it'll take me to that page. Schedule C, car and truck expenses. So here we have it. These are the descriptions of it. This is miles related to business activity that aren't commuting miles. Okay, that's not very descriptive. Commuting miles, miles driven each day from home to the first business location and driven from the last business location back home. Okay, that makes sense. So let's go ahead and look at our notes and see what we have here. So he drove 3750 from home to his main job and 1,300 miles from the gym, which is his second job, each day to his home. So according to this, those both count as commuting miles. So the total of the 3,750 and the 1,300 is 5,050. So let's go ahead and enter that there. Well, it says here that miles related to business activity that aren't commuting miles. So if he kept his log, and we see here he had 2,850 in miles from his main job to the gym where he taught classes. So that sounds like business miles that aren't related to commuting. So let's go ahead and put the 2,850 here. Perfect. Now, if you look on the port, this says, note, the total of business, commuting, and other miles should add up to the total miles on the vehicle for the year. Well, in the notes we were given that the total miles for the car was 11,230. So let's go look at this and let's just do some math really quick. So the 2,850 and the 5,050, and then take away the 11,230. So that leaves in total other miles 3,330, and that adds up to the total mileage on the year. So let's see here. He says he has a written mileage log. For these checkboxes down here, it says check if you have evidence to support your deduction. Yes, and the evidence is written. This says check if you have another vehicle available for personal use. Does it say that in the notes? It said this is Austin's only car and it was available for personal use. So let's go ahead and check this one that says your vehicle was available for personal use during off-duty hours. All right, So that's going to be all for the car and truck expenses. Now looking here, the next section after we do the mileage is Austin's other business expenses. Now we have listed here advertising, supplies, nutritional supplements, business liability insurance, and a business license. How do you think we can find out? So, sorry about that. How do you think we can figure out which of these are deductible? Let's go ahead and consult the 4012 again. So, when you're looking at the table of contents, we'll go here and we'll look at Schedule C, general expenses. That seems like it might be a good place to look. This is what the page will look like. And then there's some notes down here. To be deductible, a business expense must be both ordinary and necessary. An ordinary expense is one that is common and accepted in your industry. A necessary expense is one that is helpful and appropriate for your trade or business. Okay. So looking at these, I think advertising, supplies, business liability insurance, and a business license all sound like expenses that meet the definition of necessary and ordinary. But these nutritional supplements for his own consumption don't sound like they meet that definition, so we're not going to include those. But let's go ahead now and go to the general expenses and start adding these in. So we have 300 for advertising. We have 1,000 for supplies. We have 610 for business liability insurance. And we have 150 for a business license. Perfect. So let's go ahead and hit continue. And I think we've recorded all his expenses. So I think we're done with the Schedule C. So let's go ahead and continue to wrap that up. Now, let's go back to the interview form. Do we have any other source of income? Doesn't look like it. So let's go ahead and go to the expenses now. He had some medical expenses, some home mortgage interest, some real estate taxes, and charitable contributions, as well as student loan interest. So because he didn't have any more income, and now we're moving to the expenses, we can go ahead and continue past the income. And then this is going to be talking about our adjustments and our deductions. And we're going to go ahead and click enter myself again. And let's start with adjustments. That's a good place to start. So looking through all these, when we go back to the interview form, from his adjustments, it looks like student loan interest might be the only adjustment I can see on here when you look through all of these. So let's go ahead and do the student loan interest deduction. Now, the student loan interest is on form 1098E, so let's go see if we can find that form. All right, here it is down here, the 1098E. And this says $26.50 was paid in student loan interest. Now, is that amount fully deductible? Let's go ahead and consult the 4012 to see what we can see about student loan interest. So I'm scrolling through, looking and see in the adjustment section if I can find anything about student loan interest. Looks like right here, E8. Let's go ahead and click on that. Now, right here at the very top I can see maximum benefit. You can reduce your income subject to tax by up to $2,500. So it looks like it's capped at $2,500. So even though his form said $26.50, then you can go ahead and enter the full amount, but we just know it's going to be capped at the $2,500 because that's the max amount he can take. And I think that's the only adjustment he has. So let's go ahead and continue past adjustments and go to deductions. Now, go back up to the interview form. It says he has some medical expenses, some home mortgage interest, some real estate taxes, and some charitable contribution. These are all itemized deductions. So let's go ahead and go to the itemized deductions section now that we've finished our adjustments. And, just because it's at the top of the list, let's start with our medical and dental expenses. If we go to our interview notes here, let's see if it has anything about medical expenses. Right here, it says he has receipts for an eye exam and for prescription contact lenses. Well, to know if those are deductible medical expenses, let's go to the 4012 and go back to the table of contents. This time we're going to go to deductions. And looking down here, we're going to go to, this looks right, Schedule A itemized deductions. Perfect. The first one is medical expenses. And this gives us a handy chart about deductible and non-deductible medical expenses. It's a big list of things you can include, things you can't. Right here, though, you can see physical examinations and prescription medicines both fall in the list of things you can include. So we're going to go ahead and include both of the eye exam and the prescription contact lenses. So the eye exam was for 80 and the prescription was for 300. So looking on here, prescription 300, and we're going to call the eye exam x-rays and lab work. And we'll go ahead and hit continue. All right. So going down here, we've taken care of medical expenses. Now let's go ahead and do home mortgage interest. Let's look for that. Mortgage interest and expenses. Perfect. Let's see, does he have Form 1098? Let's scroll down and see. It looks like he does. He has Form 1098 for his mortgage interest statement. So let's go ahead and click mortgage interest reported on Form 1098. And we're going to add interest because he paid some interest. Now let's look at the form. Looks like he paid to Forsyth Mortgage Company. And he paid $52.52. And you can find that right here, mortgage interest receipt. So that's how much was paid during the year. And it looks like he didn't have any points, so we'll go ahead and skip that and hit continue. Like continue. And real estate taxes. Now, real estate taxes will also be listed here, down here. Real estate tax, $9.54. Perfect. Let's go ahead and enter that there. And we'll hit continue again. And that's the mortgage interest. Now, what's the next deduction he had? Going back to the intake form. So we covered mortgage interest and real estate taxes. Now we're going to go look at charitable contributions. I think those are up in the interview notes. So it says he has a statement from his church stating he donated $650 on December 1st, 2017. So let's go ahead and go to gifts to charity and hit begin. Cash gifts to charity. Let's hit begin. So remember, it says he has a statement from his church saying he donated $650. So we're just going to call his charity church. We'll put that in the description as well. And then it said it was on December 1st, 2017. And he donated $650. So let's go ahead and continue. Now, it also says Austin donated $100 to a friend in need through a social networking site. This wouldn't be an example of a deductible expense because you can't give charitable donations to, a friend or another person. You have to donate them to an actual charitable organization. So we're going to go ahead and ignore that. So that's probably our only charitable contribution. Now let's go ahead and we hit continue. Let's see if there's anything else on our interview form that we need to look at. We took care of wages, we took care of self-employment income, we took care of the medical expenses, the home mortgage interest, the real estate, and the charitable contributions, and the student loan interest. So I think we're all done. So this part, we'll just go ahead and click through this part. To get through these forms. Now, to get to the health insurance. It says he does have health coverage, and up in our interview notes, we'll be reminded that it said he had health insurance all year through his employer. So, yes, he does have health insurance. He received it through his employer, so the answer to this would be no. All right, he's the only member of his household, so we'll click yes, and he was insured all 12 months. Perfect, so now it says your federal return is complete. Let's continue to the summary. Now let's review the information just to make sure we covered everything. We got his 1099 miscellaneous, we covered his mileage and his expenses. We recorded his donation as well as his mortgage interest statement and his medical expenses. We talked about his interest on his student loan and his health insurance. So I think we're all done. And we already looked through the intake sheet and we saw that we talked about all the boxes. So let's go ahead and go to the questions for this scenario. All right, question 25. What income must Austin report for his business on Schedule C? So we talked about this earlier, but he reported the income from his Schedule 1099 miscellaneous as well as the cash receipts. So the answer to this scenario is D. Both his income reported on the Form 1099 miscellaneous and the cash income from his clients. So the answer to question 25 again is D. Now let's look at this. What is Austin's mileage expense deduction at the standard mileage rate for his business as a personal trainer? Well, for this, we're going to go back to publication 4012, and we'll go back to that page we were looking at earlier. That'll be right up here, the car and truck expenses. So we had our business miles, and if you note down here, it says the car and truck expense deduction will automatically be calculated using the standard mileage rate based on the number of business miles entered. The rate is 53.5 cents per mile. So we're going to go ahead and use a calculator again for 53.5 cents. And we're going to multiply that by the number of business miles Austin had. And if you remember in the interview notes, we said this number, 2850, was the number of business miles he had. And if you multiply that out, the answer comes up to be 1525. So the answer to number 26 is A, 1525. Let's look at question 27. Which items cannot be deducted by Austin as a business expense? So we talked about it. Business license, liability insurance, and advertising, those are all acceptable. But the nutritional supplements cannot be deducted. So the answer to number 27 is D. Now, going to question 28. How does Austin's self-employment tax affect his tax return? Well, for this, we're going to actually have to go look at 1040. So that came up at this page, the summary, for us to look at. So let's go ahead and scroll through here and see if we can find where self-employment tax comes into play. If you notice here, in the adjusted gross income section, it talks about the deductible part of self-employment tax. So that sounds like the self-employment tax right there, and you'll see you notice section there. And if we go to page 2, self-employment tax also comes up here in other taxes. So, how does it affect his tax return? Well, the self-employment tax is shown on Form 1040 Other Taxes, and the deductible part is an adjustment on Form 1040 page 1. So we just saw that on both pages, so the answer to 28 is also D. Now, let's go ahead and look at question 29. What is the amount Austin can take as a student loan interest deduction? Once again, we can go to 1040, look at page 1 in his adjustments, and the student loan interest deduction, $2,500. We saw in the 4012 that the student loan interest is capped at $2,500. So, and we saw it again on the tax return. So the amount he can take is $2,500. Now going to question 30. What are Austin's total itemized deductions on Schedule A, line 29? Let's go ahead and look here. You can also find total itemized deductions on line 40 of page 1040, itemized deductions. So 8056. So the answer here is B, 8056. Once again, that's found on 1040, line 40. And would also show up on Schedule A, line 29. Now, the amount of Austin, question 31, the amount of Austin's retirement savings contributions credit in the tax and credits section of Form 1040 is $120. Well, let's go look. Tax and credits. Retirement savings contributions credit, $120. So it looks like the answer to this one is true. So the answer to 31 is A, true. Now the last question, 32. Austin is not able to pay the entire balance due by the due date of the return. What are his options? For this, we're definitely going to have to go to 4012. Let's go back up to the table of contents. Sorry, scrolling through here. All right. And this, I think, is going to be in the section about finishing the return. Usually this is the end when they're trying to figure out the payment. Now, he owes, so that's called balance due. So let's click on balance due returns. And let's just scroll through and see what we can see here. So payment methods, so we can see he can pay by credit card, which C is he can pay by credit card, but let's see if we can find any of these in there as well. Those might also be options. As we keep scrolling, balance due returns continued. What if the taxpayer can't pay? Can you pay it in full within 120 days? It looks like they can go to irs.gov and establish a request to pay in full. Well, that's the answer here for B. And then it looks like applying online for a payment agreement, and I see here Form 9465. So I'm going to guess the answer here is D, any of the above. He can pay by credit card. He can contact the IRS for a full pay 120-day agreement, and he can submit Form 9465. So the answer to 32 is D, any of the above. All right, guys, that's the answer to all the questions in our scenario. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to rewatch the video, and good luck with the rest of the scenarios.